Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to the penultimate panel for today. My name is Evis Sammoutis, and I'm delighted to be facilitating this third panel discussion on the theme of networking, cooperation, and professionalization in the culture sector. My plan is just to give you a very quick overview of some of my organizations, as well as the Interfaces Networks activities on this panel theme, before briefly introducing our four panelists for today. Networking and cooperation are paramount in the 21st century world, and indeed these qualities are increasingly becoming more and more important aspects of formal training, even at the higher education level. Today, more than ever, artists must not only be able to excel in their chosen professions, but also must be able to connect artistically and organizationally with major cultural stakeholders. Modeling collaboration to our students is crucial, as well as providing them with professional opportunities very early on in their careers. That is precisely why the work of several organizations focuses on the younger generation, and some of today's project will actually articulate this further. The Interfaces Network itself has been responsible for producing a very large number of new projects in this field, and as a representative and coordinator of all actions relating to European University Cyprus's participation, I was closely involved in many aspects of this development. As an active new music advocate, coming from the most southeastern border of the European Union, networking and cooperation are truly survival mechanisms because of the island's small population, geographical location, as well as high cost of traveling to Central Europe. Therefore, participating in the Interfaces Network itself was rather crucial for our organization, and cooperation was paramount to the success of our actions and our aims to create new professional opportunities for young artists residing or traveling to Cyprus. I'll briefly cite just three examples of such actions that either the European University Cyprus or other Interfaces partners have actually developed as part of this theme. The first strand involved artistic residencies, not only by the European University Cyprus, but also by the Onassis Cultural Center, QO2, and RESHAPE. As EUC, we had actually linked the residencies to other specific actions of our Interfaces activities, such as our project Urban Music Boxes and Troubadours or the Living Museum project, two programs that aim to present new music in unusual spaces, utilizing new strategies of audience engagement. Lee, in his first panel presentation, briefly touched upon the work of the Urban Music Boxes and Troubadours, and you can see an example of how we use this action one floor below with a UP sketch, which was a software developed precisely to take new music out to communities that we don't normally engage with within the established concert halls organizations. There are many wonderful outcomes as a result of this, as well as several artistic products. Our residencies were geared towards electronic music artists, where we paired all 12 residency recipients with diverse venues and culture organizations in Cyprus, including museums, retirement centers, as well as the National Youth Orchestra, among many others. It was important for us to help our invited artists create strong contact with local cultural stakeholders, and some of them have indeed created sustainable relationships with Cypriot cultural enterprises as a result, and these relationships continue to this day. Some projects had political connotations inspired by the Cyprus problem, with a project involving recording sounds of either side of the island and then using Bluetooth connection, transmitting them to the other side. So we had a very wonderful situation where a Swiss artist was going back and forth the border. Over the context of 3 hours, she crossed 5 times. She was stopped and interviewed by the police on both occasions, and she was transmitting the sound she was recording from one side to the other. Another project involved educational aspects, while some others include site-specific tools using local musicians to perform them. This paired very well with the Interfaces' central vision for this action, that of, and I quote, creating a series of residencies for artists aiming at broadening their experience and their ability to collaborate with artists from different countries and from different areas of expertise, end quote. And I would add to this, furthering mobility. In the EUC case, mobility expanded into several US-based artists with strong European connections traveling to Cyprus. An interesting aspect here, in terms of the cooperation and professionalization, extending beyond an envisaged strategy that is, I think, worth mentioning, involved our collaboration with the 2018 SMC, that's the Sound and Music Computing Conference, that incidentally took place in Cyprus at the same time. And what we did here is that we paired our electronic music artists with that conference, creating synergies and a win-win situation that actually benefited both organizations. I believe that actions like this, actions of active cooperation, are especially crucial today, especially when we consider the harsh financial realities that we're all facing. Similar to residencies, the Onassis Cultural Center organized exclusively the Sounding Path Zeros and Kumaria residency. QO2 organized the participatory art residencies. ZKM, in cooperation with OCC and Media Electronique, organized My City, My Sounds residency, as well as the graphic notation residency and the cross-genre residency, resulting overall to 120 beneficiaries. The second area that interfaces developed crucially, I think, in this panel theme, involved a series of capacity building workshops. These were organized in Athens by the OCC in the form of an intensive workshops on new media, ICT, and audience development, as well as another event on archiving, broadcasting, and IPR workshop. These two initiatives were unique hands-on experiences for the participants that helped them become fluent with social media platforms, intellectual property, digitization, and audiovisual licensing, among many others, all whilst helping participants connect with expert professionals in the field. Organization of conferences and online presence was equally crucial in this field, and here the Montfort University's contribution has been very important in creating a resources hub as well as a forum of artistic exchange. Furthermore, the Interfaces Network helped create dozens of new compositions and new repertoire, one of example of which you all witnessed last night. We had the Young Performers Repertoire action, where we had 4 world premieres by very young performers. That was an action that was actually envisioned by EUC, but completely and beautifully executed by the Onassis Cultural Center, which is another example of cooperation among the partners. The idea of cooperation itself was crucial for the successful funding of our project, the cooperation between the partners themselves. But whereas this cooperation started between diverse professional organizations, it also expanded to cooperation involving satellite programs, to cooperation between music teachers and professional composers in the case of the Young Performers Repertoire. And I feel that this is where one of the strengths and legacy of the Interfaces project lies, in investing in the future and by embracing cooperation and professionalization across all spectrums to create sustainable results. Accessibility in all its forms is very crucial here. All scores for the Young Performers Repertoire are licensed under the Creative Commons and then will be freely available for everyone to download. There are several other Interfaces projects that reflect the ethos that I just described, but I would like to continue today's discussion with our 4 excellent panelists today, and I'll just briefly introduce them in the order that will be here in the presentations. So first, I would like to introduce Anne Becker. Anne will present the network's activities, including the Ulysses platform, and mention how some of the actions evolved since the project has started in 2012. Our second speaker is Michaela Buriánková. Michaela will give us a project insight and share some of the strategies employed, focusing on practical aspects of her project's emergence, implementation. Our third panelist is Cécile Moroux. Cécile's presentation will place emphasis on the collaboration and networking aspects to the actions of We Are Europe project that she's coordinating. And our final panelist, Milica Ilic, will give us a short work-in-progress update regarding her project and share some of the key points of her projects and ethos. So I have 1 minute, which I will yield to my panel, and thank you for your attention. We'll start with Anne.
Yes, hello. So I work as an independent production and project manager in Paris, and I'm also part of the Ulysses Network coordination team. So the Ulysses Network is a European network made of out of 13 institutions that come from 10 different European countries. All these institutions are active in the field of classical contemporary music, and more specifically in the promotion and professionalization of young artists. So the network was created 2011, based on the observation that on the one hand, in many venues, you could find very standardized productions and very limited production means for young artists. And consequently, there was also difficulties to renew the audiences. And on the other hand, the observation that young artists already during their studies, but also just after the studies, were actually already very mobile and trying to go to as many residencies, workshops, etc. as possible, but that somehow they were also trapped in this status of being a young emerging artist. And doing all these residencies, they were able to create new work, but always with very limited production means, in very limited time as well. And this work was created, but actually repeated. I mean, it was never repeated again and could not really meet bigger audiences. So in 2011, this network was created to, or with the objective to structure this mobility a little bit more. With joint forces, so in a network and in a varied but collective approach in order to give these young artists a real career push. So, yeah, as you can see, the network is made out of institutions who are not only summer academies, so professional or universities, so professionalization institutions, but also presenting institutions like festivals or venues, and performing partners like a choir or ensembles. So this is the list of some of the Ulysses activities that I would like to present to you today. So perhaps the most emblematic activity is, or are the Ulysses journeys. So, for example, this also shows how the activities of the network evolved, because in the first edition of the network that started in 2012 to 2016, these journeys did not exist. We did support international young artists, but more individually based by institutions. So we had many different activities, but it was very difficult to go beyond what we call business as usual. So in 2016, the network decided to create these journeys where all the partner institutions could identify a certain number of young artists who were then put together in a pool, and all the partner institutions were also invited to offer opportunities to these artists, like masterclasses, residences, etc. And so a group mail was sent out to this pool of artists, and they could actually choose according to their interests, needs, availabilities, a journey among all these different opportunities out of 2 to 4 stops. And so the artists were actually invited to actively construct their own career development. In each stop they could meet with other fellow artists, with very recognized tutors. They got the possibility, for example, to start at Impulse, where they could start to work on a new piece, and then go to a residency at Snape Maltings, where they could invite cooperators to develop this work further. They were meeting different audiences in different places, and of course also other professionals to develop new cooperation. Another important point is, for example, that when we started in 2012, nobody was speaking about gender equality. But of course, nowadays, this is a very important issue, even in the very classical field of contemporary music. So we tend today to respect this equality. So the logical consequence of the Ulysses journeys are then the Ulysses commissions, where some of the artists who have been participating to the journeys are recognized by several partner institutions, and they then co-commission works to these artists, allowing them to work as real professionals with professional ensembles. So these are only some examples. Daniele Gysi, Sampo Hapamaki, Ashley Fior, Sivan Eldar. We had a lot of commissions also made in a project in a cooperation with the Austrian filmmaker Peter Czakaski, and so we invited or commissioned many young composers to compose music for his films. which then toured in 5 different European cities. Then we have the Ulysses Ensemble, which is another touring project where each year we select about 15 musicians aged 18 to 30, which then build together an ensemble, and that tours in at least 3 different European cities, working in each place with great conductors, also together with professional ensembles like the Ensemble Intercontemporain or Ensemble Moderne or the Radio Philharmonic Orchestra, which also allows then the young artists to be recognized by the professional ensembles and to meet different audiences, to work on repertoire, but also on new works by composers, to work with the composers. So, and they also create, of course, a collective. So for many, in many years, actually, the musicians who met during this period, they actually would like to go on and stay together as an ensemble. This is another project, the Ulysses Remake project, which is actually a project of the audience building, with a focus on audience building. So this is a project where for high schools and vocational schools, where it's based on the simple idea that children get actually, or develop their autonomous vocabulary and ways to make their work based on a specific work from the repertoire that the students get to analyze, also in the context of the historical, social context when the work was been created. So, for example, the Sacre du Printemps or Hymnen by Stockhausen. So they learn about the historical, social, artistic, cultural context of this work and see how this echoes with their own experience. And then they have a specific app that has been developed for this project, and that allows them to go out and record some sounds. And they use then very simple software for computer-assisted composition to create their own work, but they can also mix sound art with other means like an installation or video or performance, or also acoustic music, of course. So the idea is to really enable the youngsters to develop their own approach and autonomy, and to also fight against fears that might still persist towards contemporary music, of course. And then to finish, this is another initiative of the Ulysses network. The idea is to go beyond the Ulysses network, so beyond these 13 institutions, and to open up a community of people, artists, artistic directors, cultural managers who are all active in the field of contemporary music and who can gather on this platform and create a profile for free, publish calls for participation or apply to these calls, of course. Then you can promote your work, you can announce events, you can search for members. If you look, for example, okay, for this piece I need like a flutist, okay, I look a flutist who lives next to my place. And so in order to give young artists the possibility to promote themselves and be autonomous. And we have also this website where you can discover our actions. So now our second edition comes to an end in May 2020, and so we have submitted another application to the European Commission, hoping that the network can go on for 4 more years. But of course, it also needs to. I think we are encountering challenges nowadays that we need to open up to more. Perhaps to more uneasy alliances as well. So not remaining close to our field, but also open up to, if we want that art can engage more deeply with civil society. So I think it's important that we also engage. I mean, and young artists do this already with what is happening around the concert halls and the venues.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk here about our project. I have for you only this picture. So I hope I will inspire you with the presentation to search for more on our website and other platforms. So first of all, name of our project is Emergence from Shared Experience to New Creativity, Living Heritage / Reframing Memory. Under this very nice title is very specific content because we work with a little bit different target group than the rest of the projects I have seen today, because our main goal is to develop a community around scenography or stage design, which involves also costume design, sound design, line design, well, all professions connected to creating the environment in theater and for performances. So you can see the partners we have in this project. We are spread across the northern part of the Europe and to Cyprus, and on the very far corner you can see also Taiwan. We have this society partner because we have personal connections with them, and also we think it's interesting that this is a brand new, large cultural center in Taiwan. The artistic director works in Germany. The project manager studied in Germany, and the building was built by a studio from Netherlands. So I'm just putting here this point, this question, well, what kind of European added value is this? And is there anyone who ever asked or researched on how many people, for example, from Asia are coming to Europe, study here, work here, and then they bring something from Europe to their home country? I don't know, maybe somebody will react after the presentations. So just to give you, and I can see the time was not set on. So I still have 10 minutes. Okay. So just to explain a little bit more, what is Prague Quadrennial? It is an international exhibition and festival of stage design, and it takes place in Prague every 4 years. It is organized by Arts and Theatre Institute in Prague. Just give you an idea about the scale, each edition we need about 10,000 square meters only for the exhibitions. And then we have added program like workshops and master classes, performances, and so on. So we already have a quite large network because it is an international event, and the first edition was in the 60s. So we have over 50 years of running this festival. And we have this repetition every 4 years, and sometimes there are people, okay, so what do you do the other 3 years? And one of our goal is to be is to develop these kind of projects in between, and also bring the results to Prague Quadrennial, because we have quite a large audience. We had several thousands professionals coming for each edition, and last edition had 70,000 visitors. So that's our value we are adding to the project. I will skip part of the presentation, and I will go right to the networking. To make this happen, we sustain cooperation with several types of organizations. We have professional organizations, mostly International Organization of Scenographers and Theater Technicians, which is also interesting because it was established in the 60s in Prague. Then it moved to Netherlands, and now it is the headquarters is at Taiwan. So there's some strange pattern going on. But we have developed together with them an internship program, We have 16 students coming to Prague Quadrennial and then to World Stage Design, which is similar large event done by Oystat. For this we had over 300 applications, and we hope we will continue with this project after the emergence. Also, we keep tight relationships with companies that produce the technical equipment for theaters, because we want the students participating in our events to really have the opportunity to use the newest technical equipment. And we often go to international fairs to develop these connections with representatives of these companies. We keep in touch with universities. We have a database of 300 universities. We use them to send invitations to our programs, and during the emergence we already have over 500 students and emerging artists being part of workshops and presentations. We also work with local and state government, of course, and all partners in the organization, because you can see most of them are national theater institutes. You might think that gives you some kind of stability, but it's not always the true. We can talk about Poland, we can talk about Taiwan, we can talk about Cyprus. So sometimes you need to maybe use self-censorship, maybe to go with the current flow of the political development in your country. So that's this type of organizations we have. The most interesting for me is Izolacja from Ukraine, because it is an independent organization which was previously set in Donetsk, and they have been influenced by the conflict, and they have to leave all their collections behind and move to other city. We use, of course, to developing our network, the social media. That's something I might leave for the discussion if we have the time, because for me, social media are becoming more and more problematic. And the last thing, connecting to the networking, I think for us, personal connections and word of mouth are the most important, because we are trying to be an agent of exchanging ideas, exchanging practices, being a place where the people can meet face to face. And we are supporting new generations of theater designers. So we know that people who have met at PQ 20 years ago will meet the same people the next edition and the next edition, and when they came as students, the next time they will come as teachers and they will bring their students. And also, we have a new category, and it's called PQ Babies. And as you might guess, those are kids born to parents that have met during PQ. So that's another kind of networking we are running. So, and that's all I wanted to tell you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Cécile Moroux, and I coordinate a big-scale cooperation project called We Are Europe. So it's co-funded by the EU, and it's part of the Europe Creative Program. And just before to go to We Are Europe, I just want to introduce briefly the organization I work for, which is Arty Farty, and which is a leader project of We Are Europe. So Arty Farty is a non-profit and independent organization, and it exists since 20 years now. And the first project was the electronic music festival called Nuit Sonore, and it's in the whole city of Lyon. And since 20 years, Arty Farty developed many activities, and a lot of them are based on the fact of collaborate with other cities, actors, countries, and venues. So it's really part of the DNA. For example, 2 years ago we did European Lab, which is the forum part of Nuit Sonore, in Delphi, in Greece, and we also have Nuit Sonore and European Lab in Brussels in collaboration with Beaux-Arts, actually. So it was just to say that, yeah, it's really part of our DNA and of the DNA of all the other partners, of We Are Europe, and it doesn't work, of course. Okay. So going back to We Are Europe, this project gathers 8 events, like European organizations, both Festival of Music and Forum. So you can have the list here. And there is actually a Reworks Festival, which is a Greek festival in Thessaloniki. And like we are kind of different because we are coming from 8 different countries, and we don't speak the same languages, and we don't have the same size, so sometimes it can be a bit difficult, but this cooperation works because we have the same motivation behind what we do, and we are all gathered around like open-mindedness, curiosity, diversity, experimentation, and the fact of mixing music and other fields. So when the project started in 2016, the core or the heart of the collaboration into that project was actually the co-curation. Sorry. So the objective of that co-creation to encourage the mobility of the curators and the artistic team of the festival themselves, so they get to know each other and to get to know the cities and the local scene, etc. But also to encourage the mobility of the artists and speakers, and to create a real exchange platform between the 8 organizations and at European scale. So concretely, every year, each festival invites 2 festivals of the cooperation to curate a part of its annual program. And for example, this year, Nuit Sonore welcomes Sonar, the Spanish festival, and Two Deserts from The Hague. And 8 names of the Nuit Sonore and European Lab program are the result of this collaboration. So basically, that was We Are Europe 1, and it was how all the cooperators get to know each other and start to have really trust in each other, and also start to be friends. And it was really necessary to understand each other and to adapt and to go further in the cooperation. So with We Are Europe 2, the project has changed and we have been deeper into this collaboration. So we launched what we call the 60 Faces of We Are Europe, and it's a kind of materialization of the co-creating process we have. So that means that each year we highlight 64 personalities. It can be artists, activists, researchers, intellectuals, journalists, and that's like each year we really want to highlight them because for us they symbolize our values and they symbolize something strong into the contemporary music, art, and culture European scene. So I don't know if I want to try to launch a video because I don't have so much time, so... Oh. It's okay? Okay. So the first thing with these 64 faces is that we have to collaborate to build this selection, and then we collaborate also to create a real relationship with these 64 personalities, and also to create some connection between them, especially during our festival where we create some meetings, so to really kind of create a spirit, should I say. And we also propose new spaces and ways of collaboration, and I will get back to that later when I will explain about the We Are Europe media, but which is not only one performance against one slot and one fee, it's like going further. And also, which is interesting, is that it gives us the opportunity to show who is behind the festivals and to really explain to these personalities what are our values. And something interesting to illustrate this is last December we sent an evaluation form to the 2019 list, and like to know what was the most valuable for them in the project, and for the majority of them it was not the promotion or the visibility, it was really being part of something and something collective, a collective project. So yeah, just example of 3 personalities. We have worked a lot with them last year. Dina Abdelouhez, she's a Tunisian electronic artist, a queer artist, and she lives in France now. Bendik Kiske, which is a really incredible performer. It's a queer saxophonist from Norway, and also Albert Barquet-Duran, he's a researcher, a Spanish researcher, and he has crazy projects as well. So we also have the overseas event, which is basically do showcase and go outside of Europe to connect with local scenes, etc. So we've been to New York City last year, and what was interesting, it was to discover that even for the cultural institutions in New York, it was really interesting for them to welcome a project like We Are Europe, because actually it was a good way for them to connect into them and to like have kind of synergy, because otherwise they are really into each own institution. So we were a bit late to contact them last year, but now we know better how it works. So hopefully this year it will be better. And just to finish, we have this big project, which is a media platform. So we are developing collectively digital media. So we have 2 years left now to deliver something we are proud of, and it's kind of challenging because, like, we are not journalists. We create and organize events, but at the same time, our job is also to identify personalities, topics, thematics, and to promote kind of people. So it also makes sense if we want to keep this network after Creative Europe, to create a space without a limit of time or geography, and to be able to valorize what we do during our festivals, and also to show a pluricultural vision of Europe, the one we have. So this platform is in process. Hopefully the version 1 will be available on this May. And this will enable us to go even further in our relationships with the European media, journalists, even networks, European networks we already work with. So yeah, it's the next step of our collaboration, and it's also about opening this collaboration. And just to conclude briefly, I think that which is really important in this network is the idea of solidarity between the 8 cooperators, and between even the artists and the speakers and the festivals, because it's a bit rushed at that time in the music industry, and you can feel a bit alone, and it's cool to have this kind of background with you. Thank you.
My name is Milica Ilic. I work for an organization called Onda, which is the French Office for Contemporary Performing Arts Circulation. It's an arm's-length institution of the French government that supports and encourages the distribution of contemporary performing arts, be it French or international, on the territory of France. I'm here to talk about RESHAPE, as you can see, which is a project that Onda is leading. So I will just give you a little bit more details about it, and then I hope that we can maybe also engage in a conversation here or at the bar. RESHAPE stands for Reflect, Share, Practice, Experiment. It's always good to have an acronym when you run a European project, it seems. It's a research and development project that is establishing an experimental process to radically and creatively rethink the organizational models of the arts sector. Or to put it in a different way, it's a bottom-up process by which actors are joining together in order to reimagine how art is being created, produced, accessed, and safeguarded, hopefully in the future. It's a project that is bringing together 12 partners that you can see here, 19 partners altogether, together with the associated partners. There's a huge diversity between them, as you can, at quick glance, notice. Some of them are really governmental agencies, others are civil society initiatives or professional associations. There's even a private foundation, the Onassis Foundation. What the common denominator is that they're all structures that have a mission in supporting the art scene in their countries or on their territories, in their regions. Together they cover a territory which we consider our common space, geographic Europe and South Mediterranean. And I'm insisting on this not just because with their actions all put together they cover the space of Euromed, but also because they came together around the profound belief that if the art sector is going to be transformed, it is going to be transformed on this scale rather than a national or regional scale. I am not going to go into the details of the shifts and the evolutions that working within this partnership we have identified and chose to work on, because I think that in this room we all, or most of us, share the understanding of those shifts and evolutions. Of course, the political, economic, technological, and ecological transformations, we can't anymore talk about crisis, but transformations that we are going through are affecting us all. But there is this also profound belief amongst these organizations that increasingly the way that the art sector is organized, the models that it is using, but also our own practices as intermediary structures are becoming obsolete, and that it is high urgency that we somehow rethink those practices and those organizational models. The premise that at the heart of this project, the essence of it, is really this this idea that innovation, well, if that's even a word, but or rather alternative models already are experimented by actors on the ground, that throughout this territory of Europe and Mediterranean, there are actors that already invent models, these maybe weak signals of future evolutions, of future developments for our sector, but they are disconnected, they are under the radar, they are small scale, they are under-supported. I have some examples here, but I'm just going to list them because I don't think I have time for it. But we can talk about it later on. And it's really just random examples. I mean, there's dozens of those. What RESHAPE sets out to do is to provide to these actors, or together with these actors, the time and space and resources and a framework to be able to jointly put together those experimentations and push them further on a different scale, on a higher scale or on a grander scale. And then imagine the future of the art sector, it's as ambitious as that, and do so by experimenting alternative tools, tools that are more appropriate to the values of the sector, but also to the evolutions of the society and the artistic evolutions or the evolutions of the artistic practices. And another objective that is close to our heart, and that is perhaps one that we speak less of because it's a more internal one, is to create a space for ourselves as intermediary structures to radically rethink our own practices. A lot of us are bound by the national or regional policies that we are instruments of, or that we have to work within. And those, as you know, in the current political situation are increasingly limiting us. Whereas the world and the sector are going in quite a different direction. We have identified 5 major challenges that we want to work on as a consortium. They are pretty broad and pretty understandable: art and citizenship, the fairness of our governance and our governance models, the value of art in society, solidarity and how solidarity can be infused into funding schemes, transnational or post-national artistic practices and how they can be better supported. These are identified by the partners as 5 major challenges for the sector now and in the future. And what the proposal of RESHAPE is for the actors on the ground to work in a bottom-up process to tackle these challenges. Now, what does that really mean? A few things. There is a kind of a mapping exercise going on. I'm hesitating using the word mapping because there's a lot of mapping going on and there's very little meaning in that. But let's say that there is an exercise in identifying those practices throughout these territories of around geographic Europe and South Mediterranean. A lot of opportunities, of course, to meet and exchange around these issues. But at the heart of it, the most important tool of it is really this, this framework that we propose to the actors on the ground, to artists and activists and art workers that have a track record in experimenting with alternative models and implementing them. So in this framework, they get something like a year and a half. They are engaged as experts to work for a year and a half around imagining creative solutions to the 5 challenges that I mentioned earlier. So they have a whole trajectory that they have to go through, and they get a lot of support, and they get different kinds of resources to do so. But as a result, they have to come up with concrete, realistic, and sustainable solutions to these 5 challenges. These are the criteria that are given to them, and the rest is really carte blanche. So it's up to them to define their topics and to refine their ideas and to propose a prototype. At the end of this process, the partners are engaging into promoting and advocating for the results of the process. We are now somehow halfway through. We're at the moment when the ideas are emerging, so it's a really exciting period of time. It's also very stressful because people are feeling the tension growing with the deadline approaching, but it has been a massively interesting exercise of putting together actors that are coming from hugely diverse territories and that are somehow managed to come together around common issues and work together on precise ideas and precise solutions for all of us. So these are just a few thoughts of that, and I have a small animation. So thanks a lot.
Thank you to all 4 panelists. We've been extremely efficient with time, and whether finished under or just on time. So I think we'll have maybe 3 minutes that we can have a small discussion amongst us. And I think that Michaela had a question that she wanted to ask all the panelists before we open the floor. So, Michaela, do you
Yes, I will go back to using social media for networking. I would like to know your opinion because I think we are in times when we are overloaded with social media, and it's I think it's hard to find the way to use them in an effective way, and sometimes it seems you need to have an expert to keep an eye on all the trends and knows how to connect all the platforms. So I know examples when it works, I know examples when this doesn't work so much, so I'm interested, what would you like to say about this?
Well, I can start if you if you want. Yeah, social media is something that we all strive to develop further because this is the main platform of communication with a new generation. My students are all very savvy with technology, and sometimes I have to catch up with them or ask them questions. For me, the main problem is all the Facebook and social media rely on the fact that they assume that we want to get certain information because they try to match our expectations. So sometimes it becomes very difficult to match an audience that is not like us to get them on Facebook because precisely Facebook only sends information that you want to see. So we're having an issue that we have a generation that only see things that, you know, they assume that they should like. And I think that investing in a professional social media manager is becoming more and more crucial because they can understand the complexities of such platforms and help us connect with precisely with populations that traditionally we can't really reach through the current tools. And we've been trying a lot. The main issue is not just to get them one time, but make sure that we get them back again. And I think for us personally, as an organization, that has been the greatest challenge of how we get somebody to return after that initial social media establishment has been made or content has been made. Anyone else?
No, I'm just not sure about if the question was about how to touch an audience through social media or use social media to collaborate and network with people, or
use them, effectively and not get lost in. Yeah. To use them effectively and not get lost, because
no, I don't use them effectively.
because I think we are overloaded with information from social media, and how do you want to stand out of the crowd?
I mean, with this network, with the Ulysses platform, we somehow created our own social media. I mean, it's like a platform that is open to all people interested in contemporary music, so they can actually create their own community without all the bad sides of Facebook, for example. But we also see that it's actually very difficult to animate this community. People come because they are interested in seeing the calls that are announced on the platform, and they can apply to on the platform. This is how they arrive on the platform. But then to engage them in a real community movement and exchange with the other members of the platform is actually very difficult. And I think it's also difficult because actually existing social media like Facebook or Instagram are so big that they don't have time to go to another one and to recopy all the information to a third platform, and so they actually remain with the existing.
I mean, for us, there is a whole side of the RESHAPE project which is about communicating the process as an experimental process to the outside world, and that has been a huge challenge for lack of resources. And therefore, we kind of jumped into the usual social media kind of wagon because we also chose to concentrate a lot of resources on human relations management rather than social media. Having said that, the group of this core group of 40 participants who are at the heart of RESHAPE, who are going through this process of rethinking the tools, they have an extremely acute ethical sense, and they are very critical of social media. They're very critical also of any of these corporations that are kind of investing our lives increasingly, and we use it because we kind of have to for the same reasons. But I believe that they are inscribing also in their processes ways by which we can maybe rethink to the extent to which it's affecting our lives. So I don't know if it's answering your question, but there is something about the essence of it which I feel people are increasingly questioning, even though they remain by default on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, thank you for this. I think that's why it's important that we mentioned the 2 workshops that took place right here at the Onassis Culture Center, precisely to address issues like that, social media fluency, and how do we move on in the digital era. And I think that one of the things that I take from here is that there's no substitute for human contact. There's one thing having an engagement with somebody online, but once you get them in the space, physically here, I think then that becomes a different aspect of how that engagement will carry on further more than any social media, I guess, can do. Yes, of course. And then we will open the floor to a few questions after.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because I'm in the middle of managing this crisis, which is connecting to what you're saying, because we had to cancel a major event that was supposed to start on Monday for like 100 participants. We canceled it because of coronavirus. So now we are actually transferring the whole event online. And it's incredibly complicated, but it's also very interesting to imagine how this can happen online. and I mean, seeing the circumstances in terms of climate catastrophe and so on, it's probably something that we, could end up all experimenting with. So.
Please join me in thanking the 4 panelists, and I'm sure have more discussion coming up in the coffee break.